what the state can do. But in general sense, the state has the ability to take their hands and do something to that individual on behalf of the people. Now, in a civil action, and for those who've already taken some of my courses last semester, you should know this. You have a plaintiff, and that's the symbol I use for plaintiff. It also is a symbol I'll use for prosecution. You'll have a plaintiff on this side and a defendant on this side. This delta symbol is what I'll use for defendant. Now, in criminal cases, you'll have the prosecution and you'll also have the defendant or defendants. The prosecution represents the state in the action. The prosecution is the arm of the state telling the court that they need the ability, the court needs to have the ability to incarcerate this person or fine this person or do whatever the law allows to make right the wrong. But in both the civil action and the crimes, you have two parts, you have two parties. In each of those parties, each of those sides, you have a defendant, someone who's defending themselves. The difference in crimes, the defendant has committed or is accused of committing breaking the law. And in a civil action, the plaintiff is directly accusing the defendant of doing something wrong against his person or his things or his business. In a civil action, you will not hear guilt or innocence. And you can expect a question like this on a quiz. Civil action is talking about personal liability. Some sort of civil liability for the action that was done to the plaintiff. It's not guilt, it's liability. It's making right what you did wrong. Versus a crime where it is guilt that we're trying to find. Whether or not someone is culpable for the action. Here, the remedy for the plaintiff, if the plaintiff wins, is usually money. It sometimes can be specific performance, which is, let's say there's a priceless jewel, and it's in the wrong hands. After a court case, it's found that the plaintiff should be the one that gets the jewel. Well, since it's a unique item, money won't suffice. You can't pay $1 million for this jewel and get another jewel like it. Instead, the jewel is the only thing that will make the plaintiff whole. So therefore, the court will order the person who holds the jewel to give the jewel to the plaintiff. And that's specific performance. So it's not always money when it comes to civil action. Sometimes it's literally action, or you could have an injunction, for instance, where the court is saying, don't go near this other person. In general, though, what you normally see is money. When it comes to crimes, again, the prosecution represents the state. So what does the prosecution want? The prosecution wants the guilty to pay according to whatever the law sets forth. So that might be a fine or imprisonment. potentially some sort of offsetting, like community service or something like that. But generally, when you think of crimes, think of fines and/or imprisonment. So let's focus a little bit more on crimes. Again, when you're talking about a crime, it's the state prosecuting the defendant, the two parties. The court's job in this is to effect the verdict. We have three branches of government here. We have the legislative, executive, and judicial. Because of the separation of powers, the legislature and the executive, the people representing the state, can't just go in and say, I'm finding him guilty, and now I'm going to take him into custody, and I'm going to bring him into prison. That's not how our system works. Instead, the state is asking the court and asking the trier of fact to find that guilt and to bring down a verdict and use the judicial authority granted to it by the legislature or by the constitution of that state to imprison the person or to fine the person or to somehow get that person to pay in the way that the state expects. So the prosecution here is really asking the court to do something. And it's the same thing in a civil trial. The plaintiff is asking the court to use its power to grab into the purse of the defendant, bring out some money or the jewel or whatever is being asked of the court. So when it comes to state crimes, the state is trying to say that this guy here is guilty of the crime presented to the court. Another way of saying that they are to blame for the crime. The buck stops with that person. That person did it, or that person knew it was going on and didn't stop it, or didn't tell the police. These defendants, what the state is saying, is because of that guilt, because of that blameworthiness, they deserve society's condemnation. They deserved to be condemned in the way that the state has set forth for their condemnation. And again, when we're talking about the state getting its way, the prosecution winning, the defendant being found guilty by the trier of fact, what we're talking about is fines, like I said, some sort of mitigation over incarceration, like community service, prison, or even capital punishment, death. There are a little bit more options in the criminal arena than in a civil case. You can't, you get in a car accident. You might be as pissed off as you can be to the person that hit your car. You wish them dead. Maybe not really, but the thoughts in your mind, because it was a nice car, you liked it, and you were on your way to do something and now they've just ruined everything. As much as you'd like them to have the death penalty for what they did, if they are just being sued civilly by you in court in a civil case, the most they can do is make right what has been taken from you. So to that extent, it might be repairing your car, fixing your medical problems, paying for loss of wages, those sorts of things. You will not see in civil court, I would like the death penalty for the defendant. That's, you would be laughed out of court. Now, if the person who hit your car killed someone in the process, and they were culpable in a non-justifiable way, an inexcusable way, then there's the possibility that they could be imprisoned for life or the death penalty. You won't even see prison sentences for people in civil court arena. You're pissed off that this person hit your car. You're really pissed off. You'd like to see him in jail for years. Well, he didn't commit any criminal wrongs. He didn't hurt anybody. He wasn't, it was just a typical car accident. There was nothing there that made it criminally wrong except just bad luck. You're not going to sue him in court to try to put him in jail. Civil courts do not have the authority to put people in jail for crimes. At one point this semester, we'll talk about contempt. Contempt is a very special power that judges hold, that courts hold, that apply in both criminal and civil hearings and cases. And contempt is basically sort of like a parent punishing a child. The judge says, you're not obeying what I told you to do, so now I'm going to punish you and send you to your room. Except your room isn't the room where you sleep, rather it's the slammer, it's the county jail or parish jail. You're going to go think about what you did, and usually contempt holdings can't be more than 60 days or the like. All right, and we'll go more in depth with these next topics that I'm going to be talking about, but when we talk about classifying crimes, there are all sorts of crimes. I mean, there are crimes that you laugh at. Is that really a crime? And there are crimes that you wish were even worse than they currently are. You know, someone kills an innocent baby. Classifying crimes starts at a very fundamental level. You have crimes that involve moral turpitude. Moral turpitude is sort of the worst of the worst. Like I told you, we could go to the legislature and tell them to make it a crime to stick the bird at someone in traffic. Granted, that law may not be constitutional because of the First Amendment, just so everyone knows that. Putting that aside, let's say we got that law passed. That law is a civility law. I'm kind of uncomfortable with that sort of behavior, so I want to put it on the books. It's not a heart-wrenching, anyone with a hint of morals would do that sort of thing, or wouldn't do that. Moral turpitude is behavior that is inherently wrong or evil.